compound reflexes. So in that we had seen that there are two types of compound reflexes, that is simultaneous combination and also the successive combination. And we had seen about the simultaneous combination, and we saw that what is irradiation. So irradiation is a spreading of the reflex. So we know that if the intensity of the stimulus is increased, then the spreading of the reflex also will increase. And then we had seen about the neuron threshold. So the neuron threshold is nothing but the resistance that is faced during the irradiation, that is neuron threshold. So in this class we'll be seeing about short and long reflexes. Okay. One second. Okay, so we'll start today. So as I said in the last class, what is short reflex and long reflex? So short reflex is nothing but when a stimulus is so that is known as short reflex. And in opposite to that, long reflex is that when a stimulus is given to the part of the body, the reflex will be produced in other part. So in the figure, you can see that in the first figure, when the stimulus is given into the sole of the foot, the reflex is also produced in the same area. And in the long reflex, when the stimulus is given to the sole of the foot, you can see that the opposite limb is producing a reflex. So that is about short and long reflexes. Now there are some rules that are observed in both short reflexes and also in long reflexes. So first we'll be seeing about the rules that are observed in the short spinal reflexes. So the first rule he have mentioned is that the degree of reflex spinal intimacy between the afferent and efferent spinal roots varies directly as their segmental proximity. So he's saying that, as you can see in the figure, he's saying that when a stimulus is produced at a particular spinal segment, the maximum response will be produced to the muscles which is proximal to the segment. So for example, if you're seeing in the figure, let us consider this as L2 and L3 segment. So if we are giving a stimulation on L2 segment, we know that it will produce hip flexion. So the maximum response will be produced at hip flexion, and then the moderate response will be produced at knee and then at the ankle also. So as the distance increases from the spinal segment, the response that is produced will decrease. Okay, that is the first rule that he have mentioned. Now the second rule is, for each afferent root, there exists an immediate proximity to its own place of entrance in the core, a reflex motor path of low threshold and of as high potency as any open to anywhere. So he is saying that in the figure, as you all know, there is an afferent root and also the efferent root. So he is saying that when a stimulus is producing to the afferent root, the response will be produced in the efferent root of the same reflex motor pathway. So that is near to the afferent root. So if a stimulus is produced in the afferent here in the afferent root, the response will be produced in the efferent root. That is the second row what he mentioned. So now next, about the third rule is that motor mechanism for the skeletal musculature lying in the same region of the core and in the same spinal segment exhibit markedly unequal accessibility to the local afferent channels. So in this law, what he is saying that, as we know, in most of the joint, the flexors and the extensor muscles are innervated by the motor fibers from the same roots. Okay, the same efferent root will be innervating the flexors and extensor muscle. So if we are giving a stimulus to an afferent root, it is required that both the flexors and extensors should produce a response. But in most of the cases, only the flexor muscle groups are producing a reflex movement compared to the extensor. So he is saying that in most of the time, the flexor muscle groups are producing a response when it is compared to the extensor group. So as we have already seen the question that he is asked, that is, how is that the spread of the reflex reaction when the intensity is increased, it does not extend to the whole part. So in this case, we can see that there is more resistance offered to the extensor group of muscles. So the more action will be produced in the flexor muscle group. Okay, that is what he mentioned in this rule. Now, similar to that, rule also says that the group of motor nerve cells discharged by the spinal reflex action innervates synergic muscles and not the adnergic muscle. So he's mentioning the same thing, that the motor nerve cells will be stimulate the reflex will be produced in the synergic muscles, that is mainly the flexor muscle group. So that is what this rule says. Now coming to the next rule, it says that the spinal reflex movement elicitable in and from any one spinal region will exhibit much uniformity despite considerable variety of locus of incidence of the exciting stimulus. So here what he is saying that when a stimulus is given to a particular area of the limb, all the joint will produce the same movement independent of the area of the stimulus. So for example, in case of a flexion reflex, so if we give a stimulus under the sole of the foot, the three joints, that is the ankle, knee, and the hip, the three joints will produce the flexion reflex. Okay, and it is not dependent on the area where it is stimulated. So he is saying that the location of the incidence of the stimulus, it will only influence the character of the general movement executed by the limb. So that is what this rule says. So these are the rules that can be that he is mentioned about the short reflexes. So now we will be moving about the laws regarding the long reflexes.
Ria, I think we can stop, and just any questions regarding the short reflexes can be asked.
Hello, Ria. I'm Sebastian speaking.
Yes, Sebastian.
Can you just once again explain the second rule, if possible?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the second rule, it explains that for each efferent root, there exists an immediate proximity to its own placement or place of entrance in the cord, a reflex motor path of low threshold and of high potency as any open lead to anywhere. So what it tells that, as you can see in the figure, there in every spinal segment, there will be a afferent root and also the efferent root near to that. So whenever we are giving a stimulation in the afferent root, the response will be produced in the efferent root that is near to it.
So what you are basically trying to say is that if any stimulus is given in the anterior aspect of the knee, in the same area, the efferent nerves will also come and give the reflex reaction. Is that what you're trying to say? So the area from where the stimulus goes, in that area only, the in that segment only, the the efferent response also comes.
So the maximum response will be produced in the same area, but the other areas also will produce responses which is in minimal intensity. Sir, if you can add something to it.
No, that's fine. That's fine. What you're explaining is right.
Yes, Ria. So that explains. Thank you.
Okay. Any other doubts?
So basically, when we are look into the different treatments which come under the reflex model, predominantly this is used in PNF, the irradiation principle, and we will try to, whenever we want more amount of response in any one particular region, we will use the nearby regions. So these rules, the rules on short reflexes, basically gives us a clue as to where if we stimulate, we will get the maximum response and better responses. So that's what this particular understanding of the reflex from Sherrington has given to physiotherapy. Any other questions? Okay, then I can move on to the long reflexes. Ria?
Yes, sir, 1 second.
Yeah.
So now we'll be seeing about the laws regarding the long reflexes. Okay, so the also known as Fugger laws, and the first law states that the law of homonymous conduction for unilateral reflexes. So this law explains that if we are giving a stimulus to a part of the body or one side of the body, the response will be produced in the same side of the body. Okay, that is what the first law says. So if you are giving a stimulus to one side of the body, the response will be produced on the same limb or same side of the body. Then that is the first law. The second law is the law of bilateral symmetry of the reflex action. So here we say he is explaining that if we are exciting a sensory nerve on one side of the body, as I said, it will result in unilateral reflex. That means the reflex will be produced in the same side of the body. But if the intensity is more and the reflex is spreading further, it will excite the contralateral half of the spinal cord, and it will produce the movement that is symmetrical to the homonymous limb. So what is the action that is produced in the homonymous limb, that the same action will be produced in the contralateral side. So that is about the second law. And he also says that in many cases it is not confirmed because as you can see in the cross extension and all, the response we are getting is somewhat dissimilar. So he says that in most of the cases it is not confirmed.
Ria, can you give a bit of example for the previous one, second law?
Sir, in that case,
Say,
he is talking.
stimulating the flexor of one side. So what will happen on the opposite side? Which movement will happen on the opposite side?
Sir, he says that this same movement will occur in the opposite side also, which is symmetrical to the homonymous limb.
So which means that if you're giving a stimulus onto the flexor aspect, on the same side, the flexor muscles will be acting, and on the opposite side also the flexor muscles will be acting, right?
Yes, sir. And he is saying that it is not confirmed in most of the cases, but he has given an example about the dog, that if we are stimulating the dog's hind limb on one side, the same action will be produced on the opposite side. But he says that in most of the cases that response is not seen.
Okay, right. Basically, I think he says that there was another lab of a person by name Flugger, and he has given these laws, and there are, he says the findings from his lab are slightly different from that of the Fluggers, right? That's what he tells, correct?
Okay.
Yeah, can continue.
Okay, so the third law is the law of unequal intensity of bilateral reflexes. So here what he says is that if it is a tool, if there is a right and left side of the body, when the excitation of the sensory nerve elicit a reflex action involving both halves of the body, the action is unequal on two sides. That is, the side of the stimulus produce strong contraction. So what he says is that if they are giving a stimulus on the right side, the response will be produced in the right side and also on the left side. But he says that the response that is produced on the same side will be more compared to the other side. So for example, he has given that in case of a cat, if you're giving a stimulus on the one part of the face, there will be movement of the whiskers. So he says that the side in which this stimulus is given, that side movement will be more compared to the other side. That is what he explained in this law. So next law is with association.
Can I interrupt? Hello. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Sir, like, is this like the reason for that Ramsay's phenomenon by Bronston's what we see, sir? That we do a forceful adduction, and the contralateral side also the adductor muscles response will be getting.
Evan, your voice is not clear. Can you please come again? What?
So in Bronston's, there is something known as this Ramsay's phenomenon. So, like we, the unaffected side, we are asking the patient to do a resisted adduction at the hip joint, and the affected side, we get the same response.
Yeah, Priya, can you answer that? Which law will be more suitable for that?
Sir, can you please repeat the question?
Now, what sir is asking is in Brunstrom's, when we are treating, what they say is when you want adductor muscles to work on one side, you give a stimulus, so you give a resistance to the adductor muscle of the opposite side. Okay, and that elicits action of the adductors on the other side. So, sir is asking which of these laws would be that particular technique is based on which law? That's what basically sir is asking.
I think the second law.
Can you go on to the second law?
One second, sir.
Yeah, Vipin sir, I think this law is the one which we are using over there.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. Ria can continue.
So the last law is, he says that with associated spinal reflex centers, the irradiation spread more easily in the direction towards tail than in the direction from the head. So he says that the irradiation spread more easily to downwards than the head. So here he has given some examples, like when he has compared about the reflex that is produced in the pinna and the limbs and the tail. So he says that if we are giving a stimulus on the pinna of the animal, we can see the movement of the limbs or the tail. But when we are giving the opposite, that is, if we are giving a stimulus to the tail or the limb, it is difficult to see a response in the pinna. So he says that the irradiation take place is easier towards the downward than the head. And also when he compare about the forelimb and the hind limb, so when we are giving a stimulus to the forelimb, we can get a response on the hind limb. But we require a more intense stimulus in order to produce a response on the forelimb by stimulating the hind limb. And also in the tail and the forelimb case, if we are giving a stimulus on the forelimb, we can see the response on the tail. But if we are giving a stimulus on the tail, it is difficult to get response on the forelimb. So that is what he explained in this. So these are about the laws of the long reflexes. Sir, can I continue?
Yeah, you can continue. We'll go for now. It's around 9:30, so we can go for the 5 or 10 minutes.
Yes, sir.
And
So
then you
now we'll be seeing about reflex figure. So yeah, there are some areas in our body like soles, palms, or mouth, or in some part of the animal. So if we are giving a stimulus on that part, it produces a response in a particular attitude. So that is known as reflex figure. So as you can see in the figure, they are giving stimulus on the pinna. So in the first figure in the C, you can see that when the stimulus is giving on the pinna, the response is produced in a certain form that first the response is observed in the neck and the homonymous forelimb, then the homonymous hind limb. Then the response is produced in the tail and the trunk. Then the contralateral hind limb and then the forelimb. So that is what the response is produced when he stimulated the pinna. That is what is seen in the first figure. So in the second figure, that is B, you can see that when the stimulus is given to the forelimb, the response is like the response is produced in the homonymous hind limb and the tail, then the crossed hind limb, then the crossed forelimb. So it goes in a particular pattern. Okay, and in the picture C, you can see that when the stimulation is given in the hind limb, first the response will be produced in the crossed hind limb and the tail, then the homonymous forelimb and the flexion of the crossed forelimb. So what happens is that when a stimulation is given, the response is produced in a particular attitude. So that is known as reflex figure. Okay. So last here telling that the long spinal reflexes are variable and less predictable when it is compared to the short reflexes, because he says that it varies from experiment to the experiment. Now he has talked about allied reflexes, that is the combination of reflexes. So as you can see in the figure, first he says that in order to produce an action, the stimulus is given at various parts of the body simultaneously, so that we can produce a response or an action. So in the figure you can see he gives an example like if we are giving a stimulus on the right hind limb, there will be extension of the right forelimb. Okay, and also the same response can be observed if we are giving a stimulus in the left forelimb. So he says that if we are giving a stimulus in the right hind limb and also on the left forelimb, the same response can be observed, that is the extension of the right forelimb. That is the response we can see. But in the first case, that is the stimulation of the right hind limb that produce responses of the right forelimb, it requires a more intense stimulus. So he is saying that in order to produce a response, if we are giving both the stimulus, like the stimulus on the right hind limb and the left forelimb, if we are giving stimulus simultaneously, we can easily produce a response on the right forelimb. That is what he explained here. Okay. Now we'll be seeing about the reinforcement. That is what he explained is like if there is an overflow of the reflex produced, it produces changes to the other reflex arcs that are not under stimulation. So he is saying that in case of an animal, when one forefoot is stimulated, it can produce the flexion of the crossed side hind leg. So if one of the forefoot is stimulated, the flexion of the hind leg of the cross side is obtained. And also he says that if we are giving stimulation on the hind foot, we can also see the flexion of that hind foot. So in this case also he says that if we are giving two stimulus together, we can easily produce a response. That is, he says that the two different reflex arc can reinforce one another in their action. And in the conclusion, he says that in order to produce an action, it is not only the one stimulus that is given, it requires more than a stimulus. That is, a constellation of stimulus is required in order to produce an action. That is, if we are giving a constellation of stimulus, it produces an response, and that response can itself act as another stimulus to produce another action. So the pattern can occur in a certain pattern. That is what he explains. Thank you, sir.
Okay, it was very clear and crisp. Thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So any questions? Especially first years have been keeping quiet for a very, very long time. So I think it's time that you guys also start asking, because I don't think you might be very clear as to the context as to why these responses are coming and things like that. So if you have any doubts, you can please open your mic and ask for it. Princy, Ankita, Janvi.
Sir, it was clear, and actually we could relate with some reflexes with the primitive reflexes, and so like Vibin sir showed also with the brainstem approaches.
Yeah. I think.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Janvi.
Yes, sir, we got some idea of it. So if we revise, it will get clear idea.
Okay. So I think one of the things which we have not actually explained is Sherrington. The way he studied and identified the different reflexes, you need to understand that before him, we were having a very, very vague idea as to how movements were produced. So, Ria, I think you can stop sharing the screen for some time. So what basically happened before Sherrington is people were thinking that the movements were produced by God, which means that the God told the brain that you need to move, and it started creating the movement. That was what I was thinking. So now what Sherrington does is he wanted to understand that when you see the central nervous system, your brain and your spinal cord and all these regions. So he wanted to understand what is the function of different regions. So what he did was he started cutting the different regions and removing it from the other regions. For example, he had cut all the connections from the cortex to the structures which are subcortical as well as the spinal cord. He then cut along the midbrain. He then cut along the brainstem. So when he cuts along the brainstem, what happens is there is no input from the brain which is passing on to the spinal cord. So then what he did was he just left the animal and the animal was not moving. And then what he did was he gave specific stimulus, different kinds of stimuluses, right? For example, a pinprick or a touch or a chemical substance he has applied to different regions. What he saw was whenever he applied some stimulus, he started seeing that the animal was moving, and he started closely observing and taking into consideration what stimulus is producing what movement, and he documented. So what we are actually reading is his clear documentation of what stimulus is producing what response. So he also went a little beyond that by studying different reflexes. There were a few reflexes which he has studied. So when he studied different reflexes, he always saw that there was some similarity between the reflexes. So that he framed as rules. And what we are seeing is those rules. And what people like Bobat and Norton was who found PNF and Bobat techniques did was they identified these particular details and they started giving stimulus to human beings who had brain injury. So we see that in a stroke, your cortical region is damaged. So the connection between the cortical neurons and the neurons which are below are lost. So since he found out, and Sherrington found out that animals were responding and producing movement despite not having control of the brain, the physiotherapist started giving stimulus to different regions and they started seeing the movements. Okay, right? And so the retraining of movement actually happened in that particular way that they kept giving stimulus. So what stimulus had to be given, where to be given, these ones were derived from the studies on studies by Sherrington and few other people. So that's what we are seeing. So when Riaz said that you give a stimulus in different regions, say for example the pinna or the forelimb, the other parts were moving. Similarly, in Bobat and PNF, what we have is in Bobat we have something called as a key point of control. So there are some regions in the body which you stimulate will produce a certain response. These were utilized in order to control the level of tone of the muscles. So that's how we derive it. So we are reading the background data from which the particular specificity of how to give a stimulus has come. Okay, so Selvasa, anything from your side?
Yeah, no, I think you have explained very well. Hope they understand the context of learning this reflex theory. Because even though we think that we have moved away from that, but yet very interesting to know at that point of time, his work is still some significant contribution made towards motor control and learning.
Yeah.
So I hope the students also get the idea of this all the search for the voluntary control, how it happens, and still in the rehabilitation still we are struggling. There are a lot of things to be opened up. I think this will be a starting point. Hope this carries into a bigger level.
Yeah, we hope so, sir. And because there are many interesting things, we have also got some papers where the early physiotherapists had tried to understand how different things work. I think by course of time, we'll be looking into all those beautiful ideas. So, true, as you say,
Sure.
it is really a lot more interesting in things. And I'm really also happy. You have not been there during the last year when we were initially trying to read the simple reflexes. We had a tough time and people were finding it very hard. This time I find that the students are also explaining it very clearly with very specific diagrams, and that's a huge improvisation in our way of presentation. So
Yes.
happy one way about it.
Right.
Yeah. Vipinath sir, any closing comments?
Nothing, sir.
Oh.
It's all like clear.
presentation, Ria. Good presentation.
Vipin sir, you were telling something?
Thank you, sir.
No,
Yeah.
nothing.
I'm not able to hear you.
Nothing, sir.
Okay, fine. Okay, then we will, anything from second year PGs? Okay. 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 Thank you all for again joining this. So today is Thursday, right? So we will be meeting on next Tuesday, same time, 9 o'clock, with the further continuation of the compound reflexes. Thank you all for joining this week. Jebastin, the other presentation is in the next week, I hope, right?
Yes, sir, neurophysiology, right? Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Jefferson, your voice is not audible. Okay, it's not audible, it's fine, but we'll just put across the other schedule. Okay, so we'll meet on next Tuesday. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you.
Bye all. Good time. Bye, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ria.